happened is that we had, I guess, an agenda that we were operating on that was not the one that was posted on our website. And so we stopped the meeting and sort of restarted the recording. So one thing I'd like to do is maybe we should go back to public comment. Is there anyone who hasn't given the public comment that would like to give public comment now? Okay, seeing none. So do we now then go back to Dr. Swander's presentation? Is that what we should do? Okay, yeah.
Will you please introduce Dr. Swander too for those?
Okay, again, I'll reintroduce Dr. Carl Swander, who is the head of the National Testing Network, and he's giving us a presentation on the current run on his program, his operation, and the entry-level tests that we use for police officers in Seattle.
Maybe you can just start with just a brief, don't go back over it, but just briefly describe where you started, just so the background, so you before you jump in, because people would have missed that. They were
gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just been in business since 1981. Specialize in public safety assessment, test development, and we work with departments all over the country. And let's see what else did I have on there. Well, in terms of our tests, so we went into the testing part first, which is the core fundamental part of the entire national testing network process and the entrance point for most organizations in terms of testing. And so we talked about some of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we covered. And the goal of the entrance exam is to predict performance on the job and to have a robust cover of what that candidate brings to the table as they process in the hiring process. So we really are trying to get a comprehensive look at those candidates. We do a detailed validation and development process that is a multi-year, multi-jurisdictional process where we work with dozens and dozens of subject matter experts in order to identify the content and build the simulations in order to measure those aspects of the job. In terms of doing that, we build a content validation profile for the test where we're demonstrating that the test is measuring critical knowledge, skills, and abilities of the job, which is a standard part of a validation process. And we're just getting into the next step of validation, which is criterion validation. And criterion validation is actually it's looking at the test in relation to some kind of criteria. And on this one, as I say at the beginning, all right, our goal is to predict job performance. So that's our criteria, is job performance. And so what we do is we actually give the test to hundreds of police officers, and we collect performance evaluations from their supervisors. These are not city or local level performance evaluations. They're independent performance evaluations used for the purpose of validating the instrument. So we take that information and we look at how the test correlates with those ratings of job performance, and we get strong, significant correlations with not only the overall, so the overall test itself predicts job performance, it is correlated with it, and the sub-dimensions are correlated with different sub-dimensions of performance on the job. So we do a lot of detailed work. We've given it to over 300 police officers and from a variety of different jurisdictions, and have established that relationship exists. It's the only piece in the entire testing process that you have anything that actually substantiates that what you're doing is predictive of job performance. Backgrounds don't do that. Psychologicals don't do that. Oral board interviews don't do that. You don't collect all of that information on those pieces. You just have it on your entrance point. That's why it's so important to do. And that's why it's so important to have an entrance exam, because it's really the only piece. Now the other ones do hit on it, and don't get me wrong, it's not that they don't have any relationship to job performance, but they are not specifically targeted and developed and then scientifically shown that they do predict job performance. This is an extremely beneficial type of validation for large metro organizations, and it's not always done. It's not, most tests are content valid and not, they don't have criterion for validation that has been done. What it does get you in terms of, again, large metro, it shows that it works. You know, we like to show that it works. But it also helps support a lot of different uses for the exam. So in large metros, it's very common to rank order candidates on a list. It's very hard to defend a rank ordering process in a content valid test. So because what you have not done is shown that incrementally that test predicts job performance, right? Because you've shown that it matches to the job, but you haven't actually shown that at this score level, people are more likely to do better than at this score level. And so it's harder to defend the rank ordering use. It's also harder to defend cut scores and making modifications to cut scores. So content validity, you often target a certain cut score when you're content validating the test. If you have criterion validation, you can modify those based on circumstances, based on other maybe add more tests in there, have different profiles. You've got data to support what you're doing. It's going to be defensible if you do it in the right way, but you can support a lot of different uses. We also can specifically test for bias. Most tests would say they don't have any bias, and they're attributing that to how they developed the test. You can actually assess for bias with criterion validation. You can look and you can actually see, does this predict as well for certain groups as it does for the majority group? You can see, does it predict differently? And you don't want something that obviously predicts differently for each group, because that would be a biased test. So we can actually assess for that. In terms of, again, developing these tests, we get more data about adverse impact. We're able to better develop the test to minimize adverse impact and group differences. So again, when you're looking at metros, high risk, a lot of moving parts, the criterion validation is an absolutely critical thing that you want to have in looking at a test. Go ahead. And just one more piece of the validation. We developed these. It's a 2-3 year effort. A lot of work because we do simulations. So I'm just going to talk about it in a second. But at the end of the day, we don't stop. We continue to validate these things. We continue to work through validation to ensure that the content of that exam is relevant over time. If we see things change, we change. We want to develop a new test. We want to develop new content. But we are assessing that. We have, as part of the knowledge, skills, and abilities profile of the test, we collect survey data from police officers over time. Over the last 10 years, we've been collecting. We have more than 2,000 police officers who have completed these things, rating the importance of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we're measuring. And they continue to come back as the exact same profile that we originally developed. These are critical skills. They are extremely important, and they're needed to do the job. So we continue to validate it. Just a few points on simulations. We're often, it's called a video test because it is video, but the intent of a video test is to simulate the job. I've done a lot of studies and research on them, and they really do work. They really do. They simulate emotion. They simulate the environment, and they get people to have different response profiles than a written exam. So not only do we get better prediction, the literature is clear. We demonstrated. There's literature out there shows the video test simulations do predict better. We get better, higher correlations with job performance, and so we continue to strive to develop things in that capacity. We want the things that predict as best as possible. There's other benefits of that. If you have video instead of written content, you have less adverse impact typically on exams. And these, not only ours, but we see this across literature as well, that there's less adverse impact because you're not cognitively loading that part of the exam. We're not trying. We've got writing and reading. We've got things that measure the job-related cognitive stuff. in the video simulation, we're trying to measure human interaction skills. We're not trying to measure the cognitive ability of a candidate. So we're really, again, better able to specifically measure that skill set. So a lot of research on those. They work. The video simulations are a great medium for the human interaction, and they consistently predict the best out of anything you could possibly get. So they predict better than any of those other tests we have. They predict better than reading and writing tests. Because it's a fundamental, really critical part of the job. And Seattle's been, I worked in Seattle in 1993, developing the first video test in law enforcement. And Seattle's been was a partner then. They were a partner in the second round development, and have always been invested in that aspect of human interaction. We want people that can handle and deal with people appropriately, and not get not have extremes, or not be able to deal with it, and because it's so critical. People's lives are on the line. It's so fundamental to what policing is, and Seattle's been a partner on that since we've been doing it. Let's go on to the next. So that's the testing. Again, that's the core. If you don't have if the test isn't right, nothing else matters at the end of the day, because you're going to be bringing people forward that aren't suited to do the job. You're going to be putting all of your energy and effort into all of these other pieces that aren't designed to produce a performance. So they'll screen people out. They're not necessarily getting you the people that you want. The secondary part of that, though, is we need to make it as convenient as possible for candidates. And really, National Testing Network was founded to remove barriers for candidates to get into the process. Because prior to National Testing Network, and even a lot of places across the country, candidates have to go to each individual department to take a test. And so they're going around and they're taking 10 different tests before they get a job, right? So because and that's a barrier for them, and eventually they may not go around and take those tests, but they take a lot of tests, and that's how they. So we've consolidated that down, and over the past 15 years, we've been building out a really robust solution for candidates. That every kind of goal of ours when we're continuing to build on it is never stopping is to continue to make it with less barriers, right? Make it easier for people to do it. So we have a pretty streamlined process that includes we're posting jobs, the recruitment, administration, scheduling, all the way through scoring, portal. We've been building even more things in the system, like online oral boards. They can take the oral board right in their candidate account. We just launched our site program so that we can turn the site around in less than a week. And we're really trying to, again, move this thing, reduce barriers, central around the written test. So we can go on to the next one. So just kind of an idea of how robust our network is. Again, this is our monthly. We have 3,000 virtual seats. We scale that up and down depending on what's going on in our candidate population. We have 13,000 plus physical seats, like at testing centers, and we have 500 seats in Washington. We have regional offices, Idaho, Oregon, California, and again, we've got a team that is continually building on this, and we do see primarily the push is continue to go towards virtual, although brick and mortar is a good place to have other flexibility to get people in, and just again reduce barriers, give them options to be able to get in and test. In terms of our administration, again, 50% are virtual candidates. One of the things with National Testing Network is we are a large national company, so we work with a lot of large clients, a lot of small clients, about over 1,000 in total. And what that does is that gives us the ability to have a more robust. As we build, we continue to upgrade our candidate support, in terms of our administration, and all the different offerings that we have just continue to scale, which again keeps it more and more available to candidates to be able to get in and test from anywhere they want in the country, and they can get in and apply to it. So just to give you some of the ideas, probably read in the report, you've got some idea of who we work with. One of the things, again, 1,000 clients we've got a ton. I've worked with a lot of the big ones in many different ways, and I think there's some. Instead of just naming names, you probably all recognize all the cities there, and they're big cities. But the important part of us working with all of these big cities is a couple of things. One is we have experience in a lot of different capacities. So, we're a lot of these are, departments that have been under consent decree. We work with monitor teams in implementing our exams. We've worked with DOJ in many of those scenarios and validation efforts. And so, we've got a lot of experience. We've got a lot of experience being in front of commissions such as this, city councils, because we've been there, we've done that, and we continue to do that. We continue to work with those clients. The second part of that is that every single one of those clients scrutinizes us as they should, like you should. And so they have their own industrial psychologists in many of these places. They have their own testing people. They review and read our validations front to back, and they're comparing us to whatever else is out there on the market. All of them are doing that. And so we continually rise to the occasion and have the best product that they see fit to implement in their organizations. And again, we continue to bring them on every year, large organizations, because we've really done all of that work. And we actually appreciate the due diligence that Andrea and the team has done. I think that's important. You should really always be doing that. You should always be looking at what you're doing, because at the end of the day, said this is the only piece of your testing process that predicts job performance. It's specifically designed and validated to do that. So yeah, I think we got one more on here. I know this is of interest because there are this DOJ here. Again, I've had a lot of experience myself working with monitor groups, DOJ legal teams. I've been the subject matter expert witness. A lot of these different things that you would want to have, and hopefully we never have to use or be around it. But again, I've had a ton of experience. I've been deposed by 10 DOJ lawyers at one time, and it's just part of being in that space that we're in, and we're experienced and able to handle a lot of those scenarios. And again, when we validate these things, we do these large validation programs under the DOJ wing. They're bringing their own experts, big people in our field that come in and are experts on their end, and they're nitpicking at every single thing we do. So again, it just adds to our experience set, and it's why we really, again, start everything we do, we develop to that level. That any little thing that we do, we're thinking of it at that level, not just let's get a 50 item paper pencil test out there. No, we want something that's going to work because they're our clients, and that's going to withstand all of that scrutiny at that highest level. So that's my presentation. Again, lots more detail and depth if you want to go into it. I'm happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions? Stacy, do you have any questions?
Not.
Tom, do you have any questions?
Not this time.
Okay. I just had a couple of questions. So what, in terms of like keeping in contact with the person that signs up to take the test, what do you do to sort of make sure the person follows through with everything that's involved?
Yeah, great question. So there's a lot of communication, and again, that some of it's department dependent how much you want to have, but obviously we follow up them as soon as they purchase a test. So they get the information about how to take the test, what their time is. That's their kind of first communication from us after they've signed up for an exam. They're reminded 2 days prior to the exam. And then if they don't have then we have online components into integrity, bias. Those components are in their candidate portal, and they're reminded daily about completing those. And so we're trying to get that. We don't want them to just not know it's there or forget to take it. Some clients choose not to have that happen, so if you don't want them to be reminded about that, we can turn those things off, but that's kind of that's our reminder profile at this point. We are building right now, as we speak, we're building a new candidate interaction system where we want to get even more job specific and let our clients be able to determine what those reminder parameters are. But we're building that right now. I would expect that to be released within the next 6 to 9 months.
Thank you. The other question I had, this is probably a dumb question. There's nothing to prevent a candidate from taking your test and other tests, is there?
No, I mean, I actually think most of them do.
Okay.
To be honest, yeah, I think I think what I've seen in the industry is that candidates want to give themselves, the ones that are motivated and interested in being in law enforcement, want to give themselves the best opportunity to get that job, and so they are taking multiple tests, and whether that's through multiple test companies or just going to that organization, taking a test at that department. So again, organizations offer their own tests all the time. We have hundreds of organizations who just use our test and they administer it once a quarter, once a year. And so the candidate would not be able to take our test and transfer score. They'd have to go to that department and take the test locally. So I think they're doing it all the time. I've seen it happen with our own tests when people are using it like they said by themselves without having us administer. You see the same people coming in to take tests at different organizations.
Add a little flesh on that. When I applied to become a firefighter about 9 years ago now, I took public safety tests for the fire side of it, public safety, National Test Network, and at the time Seattle administered their own entry-level exam. The fire department. Someone took a unique Seattle test at Payne Hall. They used to fill the place up. I think 8,000 to 10,000 people used to show up. Yeah, most people are looking for a job. They know
A lot of tests, yeah.
They know who hires off which lists and where to go. If you want to get a job with Seattle, or you want to get a job with Bothell, or you want to get a job in California, candidates know which test they need to take in order to do that, in my experience.
I have a question, if I may.
Sure.
I had assumed that the burden of taking multiple tests would be so great that candidates would be dissuaded from doing that. But that's an assumption. It sounds like that might not be the case. I mean, and related, are there materials out there for the different tests? And so candidates are having to study for 2 to 3 different tests, or do candidates go in cold and they're just walking in and taking the test, or some combination?
Yeah, that's great questions. I do again believe that most of them are taking multiple tests, and then in terms of preparation for our test specifically, there's not much preparation. So it's really is coming in cold, it's coming and taking the test. We design them that way so that there isn't a learning element to it, and or knowledge component, which is typically what you don't want in an entry level exam. So they can sign up this morning and take one this afternoon if they want to. And it's really, from what I've been exposed to with candidates, it's not that big of a burden for them to go take a test. They do it all the time.
Any other questions? Anybody else?
I want to ask a question.
I think we're just doing commissioner additions.
All right, well, Dr. Swander, thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to Andrea's report.
Oh, Tracy's going to put my presentation up. Thank you, Dr. Swander. Thank you for being here, and thank you for talking about the services that Seattle currently uses for the entry-level police officer and lateral police officer jobs. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We've got a pretty large audience online. We've got an audience in person. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm gonna assume that everyone has read, or at least has the ability to read, the report. It is quite lengthy. We published it on Monday. It's up on our website, and we have hard copies here for anyone who'd like to take away a copy. So I'm going to try to keep this pretty high level because the in-depth reporting is really accessible, and I hope we'll have some time for questions as well. So our objective in conducting this due diligence was to compare our current exam and services with another company called Public Safety Testing and their offerings, their police officer, corrections officer exam, and the services that they provide to both the city and to candidates. My goal was to provide a written apples-to-apples analysis of those two bodies, and we provided appendices to further educate and inform the report. I was also asked to make recommendations to the Public Safety Civil Service Commission or PRAD. Next slide. This is all information in the report, but essentially we were really trying to do what I said on the last slide, is we were trying to conduct an apples to apples. There was a great deal of interest in potentially switching exams, and from my perspective, the genesis of this is there was and may still be a belief or a feeling or some I'm not aware of a great deal of evidence, but a desire to look at this other testing company to see primarily if it could help Seattle boost the number of applicants. As you know, Seattle, along with many other cities in the United States, has had a difficult time recruiting new applicants, hiring more police officers to fill the gap that was left by a huge trend of attrition starting in 2020. And that continues today, though good news, we do have the good news that our applications are increasing. So here are some of the questions that, in addition to just doing the apples to apples comparison, some specific questions we wanted to look into. How equivalent are the exams in terms of what they measure for candidates? We wanted to really delve into whether there's adverse impact on the pools of candidates who take the exam, and how potentially switching an exam or adding an exam, if that were possible, would essentially impact Seattle's demographics. One thing that Seattle, I think, really takes a great deal of pride in is in the racial diversity of its candidate pool and its hiring pool. That's really quite an achievement and really a significant change over time. If we look at the period in the early 2010s and early 2000s, it was not nearly as diverse as it is now and reflective of the community. We wanted to really look at whether the hope and the goal of increasing the numbers of applicants would be able to be achieved, because this would be a significant change. We worked with NTN and used this particular exam since 2012 as we were heading into the consent decree, under which we are still under in part. And specifically, the request was either to add or switch to a different company, or the request for exploration anyway. And we wanted to look at the pluses and minuses of making that kind of a change. Next slide. I think, did we go backwards? All right, well then I've already stated the objective, so we can go on to the next slide. Okay, let's go past scope. All right, limitations. I won't say too much here, but although public safety testing was initially expressed interest in participating in this due diligence process, fairly quickly, after about a month, they did let me know that they did not want to participate in the due diligence anymore. And eventually, both iOS, which is Industrial Organizational Solutions, and Public Safety Testing did let me know that they did not wish to be considered for partnership, a business relationship with the city of Seattle at this time. I understood that. I completely respect that decision, which is obviously theirs to make. However, I had committed to conducting this due diligence process and providing my findings and recommendations to you, the commission. And I let them know that. Next slide. And so this report was completed with limited information. We were able to obtain some information, and then there is information that is publicly available about the public safety testing company and the exam. I won't go into the methodology here, but you can read about it in the report and on this slide. I did also get to take a first-person look at the exams, but I'm really trying to be careful in all of these bodies to respect the intellectual property and the proprietary interests of both NTN and the public safety testing company, so I will not speak of that. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. These are the 6 areas that we really tried to investigate: accessibility for candidates, and also for the folks who are working at the agency trying to gather candidates' scores and information and process that. Exam characteristics, you heard quite a bit about NTN's exam characteristics from Dr. Swander here today. The candidate pools, which we have really only information about NTN's candidate pools, customer service, experience with comparable agencies, and other factors, which are really fairly simple: contract costs and other terms of the agreement. In terms of exam accessibility, we found that both exams were fairly accessible. I did conclude that the availability of the NTN exam was much greater than for PST. They have many more online slots for testing, although I understand that PST is quite responsive to its customers as well. As I said, the exam characteristics, you'll find an in-depth analysis of those based on the information that's available in the report. Next slide. All right, one thing that we did discover, and this is actually not so much about PST and NTN, but one of the concerns that was raised to me and to some of you was how long does the Seattle's hiring process take? There has been a great deal of consternation by various folks, and the PSCSC's process has been pointed to as being particularly slow. One of the thoughts in requesting this exam, and as well as a separate matter, which is sort of a continuous register, is that our process takes too long, and we are losing good candidates, while they're sitting around waiting. Based on the actual data for hires in 2023 and 2024, candidates apply 27.7 days before their name is handed to the Seattle Police Department for further assessment, hunted by a recruiter. This was actually really not an entirely surprising finding, but the fact that it was that few of days was a little bit surprising even for us. And so one of the efforts that our city legislators and other leaders have been engaged in is to more fully support the public safety civil service and the exam staff by adding a staff member. We are in the process of hiring a new staff member, which in that additional resource will allow us to move to a continuous testing basis and to be providing names to the Seattle Police Department every 2 weeks rather than every approximately 6 weeks. Hopefully what we will see then is if candidates are dropping out during that process, which we do not have concrete data on why candidates do not proceed through every single stage of the process. And you won't be surprised to hear that folks drop out at every single stage. They're selected out by SPD or PSCSC, or they self-select out. So we are really interested to see if we can reduce any fallout of those processes, and interested to see what happens on the 27.7 days, whether that gets longer or shorter on our phase, on our candidate phase. And then we found that for those hires, it does take approximately 5.5 months while those candidates are with SPD before they are hired and proceed to the academy. I believe about 6 weeks of that is the before the batch program for new hires. Next slide. If you've read the report, you know PST did eventually decline to participate in the due diligence. They did not answer a set of questions that were sent to them, and eventually both the test administrator and the test developer requested not to be considered to work with the city of Seattle at this time. Doesn't necessarily mean forever. But I did also find through our investigation that its current exam is not likely an option for the city of Seattle. And the report goes into quite a bit of depth about how use of two different exam instruments would create practical and legal complexities for the city of Seattle if we were to go that route. Next slide. All right. That is the one I just mentioned, so we can go to this slide. All right, key finding number 2. I spoke to Chad Label, who is the CEO and is an industrial organizational scientist with iOS, a company in Chicago or in Illinois that built the exam instrument that PST uses, and would be the company and entity that the city of Seattle would engage with in order to do a validation process for that exam. Mr. Legel told me that due to multiple factors, he thought it unlikely, and he had not done the analysis yet, but he thought it unlikely that the city of Seattle would be able to use that exam that PST has. And PST currently, at least at the time I spoke to Mr. Legel, only had one exam, and it could not be customized.
Could not be customized or hasn't been customized.
My understanding, I don't know the business agreement between those two companies. My understanding is that there was not an option at that time to customize that exam.
And sorry to interrupt, I should have saved my question.
It's okay. It's perfectly okay. Actually, feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'd rather have a conversation than read slides to you.
Actually, along those lines, I have a question for Dr. Swander. I realize you can't speak to different companies' tests, but in your experience in the industry, to develop a test or to modify an existing test and then go through the validation process, basically from the time someone tells you go to the time you'll be able to actually administer that test, what do you think would be a reasonable time frame in your experience?
I mean, a lot of it would depend on the organization and their responsiveness. In terms of the validation effort, again, I don't know what the modifications would look like.
Sure.
But if you're going to actually develop a written exam, and then if you had to do a lot of rework on the written exam, and we did look at least a year to do the whole thing. The various phases that take time. Development is one, obviously, from the company side. You have to collect survey data from officers on for the content validity, and then if assuming you probably want to do a criterion validity, then you have to give the test to officers and collect the performance evaluation. So those two phases, in my experience, are going to take probably 6 weeks each. So just that 12 weeks if things go right, just to do that. That's a standard development side.
So it sounds like probably best case scenario, 1 to 2 years in your experience, in general, in your experience with these things.
Yeah, I'd say a year minimum. Yeah.
Right, and so my third point here, development of a new custom exam, which would be the likely outcome if we were to engage with iOS and PST, would not achieve the stated purpose of the request. Because envision this with me here, on a website, a testing company's website, like NTN, PST, or other companies, you can to take an exam, and you can select the agencies that partner with that testing company. This is unless they do their own, test in-house. But if they're using that service, typically you can select from a list of agencies that you want your application sent to. Commissioner Applegate has probably done this. And you might pay a small fee to have it sent to each of those agencies. So they might waive the fee, as Seattle does. Most agencies do. The company or the agency will pay it for those candidates, and off they go. So you've basically killed a couple birds with one stone. However, if we were to partner with iOS and PST and offer our exam, our new custom exam through those companies, I have to assume, I gather based on what I know about these companies and these tests and development, that you would not be able to do that because it would be a different exam. You'd have to sit for the second exam, which sort of, in my mind, eliminates or reduces at least the benefit of working with that company. Because the stated sort of challenge, as Commissioner Canola, characterized a little bit earlier, was that candidates don't want to sit for more than one exam. I don't have evidence of that. I can't say whether it's true or untrue. But if that is the goal that this was intended to address, one of the goals this was intended to address, a new exam would not achieve that purpose. Next slide, please.
So just to clarify, you're saying that if someone sat down for a test, they could click boxes for a bunch of different cities that use one test, but we have to customize our test given our requirements. They would not be able to just click Seattle. They would have to take an entirely separate exam in order to apply with Seattle in that particular case.
Correct. They would have to take the one exam to apply for Tacoma, Everett, Bellevue. That would be one exam. But if Seattle had a different exam, even if they're using the same test administrator, you can still click that box, but they're also going to request that you schedule 2 different exams. Hypothetically, that is my understanding. The third finding was that use of 2 different exam instruments would create practical and legal complexities for the city of Seattle if we were to take that route. We are required by law, by state law, reiterated in case law, city code, and public safety civil service rules to create a ranked register. The challenge of doing that when you're using 2 different exam instruments seems to be significant based on our research. One is that, I mean, the two exams in question have very different pass rates, which is a function of a couple different things, which I'm sure I don't totally understand and Dr. Swander would be able to describe, but one is that the cut score. We have only a couple pieces of data we do have a couple pieces of known data about the cut scores of these 2 exams, or the pass rates anyway. PST, Mr. Walters, the CEO and owner of PST, was quoted in the Seattle Times as saying that his exam has a 90% pass rate. Our exam has closer to a 73, actually sometimes slightly lower, sometimes slightly higher pass rate. And I cannot compare, cut scores, and I'm not sure that would be helpful when even if I could, because the content of the exam is different. However, we know that 90% of test completers pass PST, and approximately 73% in 2023 of Seattle test completers passed the NTN exam. And so there is not a practical way to combine these and accomplish the requirement of creating a ranked register for SPD. Ranked registers are not just a requirement, but they are also the way that we effectuate our legal requirements with regard to veterans and veterans preference. We also have, as you know, multiple other kinds of preference in the city of Seattle that apply to PSCSC's registers, community service preference points, language preference points. And it's really important that we are able to apply those to people's scores and have them actually mean something. A blended register is the term I actually took from PST's agreements. We have seen some of their partnership agreements with agencies, and they actually have an agreement. They have a portion of their agreement that has them agreeing that they will not be required to defend an agency's use of a blended register. Blended registers using more than one testing instrument. Again, the difficulties of producing a ranked register with 2 exams would almost could be achieved by the companies opening up their exams to each other and their scoring matrices to each other and figuring out how to calibrate those 2 instruments. Not very likely to happen because these are private companies with their business interests and proprietary interests at stake. The other thing that was suggested by iOS as a way to use 2 exams is to do them in succession. That would not achieve these goals and might actually be counterproductive to the goals that we're hoping to achieve, which is to increase the number of applicants to the city of Seattle. Applicants and eventually hires, which is really more important than successful police officers, which is the ultimate goal. Next slide. I'm not going to belabor this point. I think I go into it in sufficient depth in the report, and you've heard a lot for yourself about Dr. Swander's and NTN's exam and services, but I do find in the report that the current exam effectively assesses qualities that are related to constitutional policing, important in every jurisdiction, and of primacy here in the city of Seattle. We did a survey of CPC commissioners, and that information is in the report, but they rated the they rated the dimensions highly that are related to constitutional policing and are assessed as part of the NTN exam. You read about the in-depth validation process that the NTN exam has backing its use in the city of Seattle and its history in the city of Seattle. And we're grateful that it does not have any adverse impact. And our staff is ensuring that for every phase of the exam. This is active monitoring as testing processes occur. We don't look at it once a year, we look at it all of the time. And so we would know immediately if our testing processes were having an adverse impact. We are happy to report that we do not have adverse impact as defined by the EEOC in use of this exam. And finally, you heard Dr. Swander discuss the other cities that have selected this test for their own use for entry-level police officer. So I won't go into that, but we do think that this is highly appropriate for the city of Seattle. Next. This slide just reflects the top dimensions as rated by the Community Police Commission, which do match up with the NTN exam. Now I should say the PSC exam does measure some of these dimensions as well. And I did not have in-depth access to all of the aspects of their report. So it may be entirely possible that they test some or all of these. One I noticed I did not see mention of in their materials was about de-escalation and restraining the use of force. However. Next slide. Great. The bottom line is that I recommend that NTN continue to use NTN as the sole vendor for the police officer exam. Number one, we are under contract with NTN. We have been for some time. They are available. This test is available to us. This is in use today. There are probably candidates testing today. There are certainly people applying and scheduling themselves for this exam today. This is just a fact. I don't know that it'll be persuasive, but just for your information, and as Dr. Swander mentioned, we use NTN's fire team exam for our firefighter processes. We do those much less frequently. We do them every 2 years, and we will be starting that process here in the fall of 2024. NTN, as in right here, won that contract after a deep, in-depth, many months long analysis, not conducted by NTN, conducted by another consulting company of Seattle's hiring for entry-level processes for firefighter, and was selected at the conclusion of that process as the vendor for that exam. All right, let's go to the next slide. I'm also going to recommend that the commission conduct a request for proposal process in 2025 to see if there is something that is better suited out here. We are not afraid of change. We are not resistant to change. We should put all of our vendors, under consideration from time to time. And though we will still be under contract with NTN, I hope they'll give us grace and not mind submitting another proposal in 2025. And I have invited PSC to do the same. There are other companies out there as well. These are not the only two in the game. So we will conduct that process and see what happens. Next slide. And finally, I recommend that we continue to engage in continuous improvement. We are part of a coalition of departments and individuals trying to improve the entry-level police officer hiring process, trying to attract high-quality candidates to the city of Seattle, trying to help SPD replenish its ranks with the very best candidates who will become successful police officers. And so, you know, this is a recommendation to you all, but this is a recommendation to me to continue what we're doing, what we have been doing. And I want to thank Deputy Mayor Tim Burgess for being here today. He is spearheading and has been spearheading that process. I think we are making progress. I can see it in the data. And I want to continue to partner on that work with him and others. Next slide. And here are some very high level data, which we're also going to get to. Well, some of it's in-depth data, some of it's high level, but I just wanted to point out we are in the 4th cycle of Seattle police officer applications this year. And you can see that we are in this phase, we are receiving 14.10 applications a day. You'll hear a little bit more from Adelaide Elders later in this meeting. Thank you for your patience about how applications are going. But they are trending upwards, and it's a very hopeful trend. We're going to work hard to keep that up for what we can do. We're going to support the other teams on what they can do. But I just wanted to end this presentation on a bit of positive news. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Commissioner Connell, do you have any questions?
Well, I had a lot of questions when I was reading the report, but I will say, having listened to the presentations, I think, Ms. Sheila, you addressed most, if not all of them, either through your verbal comments or your written comments. So at this time, I'll hold.
Commissioner Applegate, do you have any questions?
No question.
Okay. One question, how long have we been using this test?
So we have been using this test was developed in 2011. We started using it in 2012. Okay. And it has changed over time. We added in 2021 the PSSA parts 1 and 2. Those were particularly to enhance the exam's assessment of, this is going to test my memory here, but can you tell us the components that the PSSA 1 and 2 were particularly designed to?
Yeah, so integrity as these fours, so the equity, those are the PSSA components.
Right. And Commissioner Cannell, you were on the commission at that time, a part of that decision. Do you remember anything about that?
A little bit. It feels like a long time.
The commission wanted to be sure that we were robustly assessing for these aspects in our entry-level police officers and lateral police officers. There was a lot going on in 2020 and 2021, and the commission, you know, had eyes on it. And we thought that this was sort of could be a belt and suspenders for ensuring that we were hiring the kinds of police officers that, you know, had the values, abilities, knowledge, and skills to really do the job. It wasn't that there was anything wrong with the test at the time, we didn't feel. But the commission, you know, is a living entity, as you are embodying right now. So that was what changed. And then, Dr. Swander, would you mind speaking to how the test is updated and adjusted over time?
Yeah, we're continuously looking at the data on these exams and just monitoring the performance to make sure it's still working. Test data looks right. We're looking at repeated test takers, people take it multiple times, make sure we're not seeing any trends. We haven't. And then the second part of it is for us is also looking at the incoming validation. So we're really actually assessing what the job looks like over time, and seeing if there's any shifts or changes within the job. So if we have like 500 knowledge, skills, and ability statements, if those ratings are changing over time, then we're looking at what kind of modifications that we might be able to make. The PSSA was a combination of a couple things that allowed us to be able to do this. The extra integrity piece and the bias and use of force. We measured in some of the other ones. We want to get more in depth with it, but in that time frame, with everything going online, it opened the door for it in the public safety realm to be able to actually offer a test online like that. And so we're able to measure more now than we would have been able to measure historically within an exam. So prior to 2020, you were pretty much limited to 2-hour exams, and that's about all you could get people to sit for. That's all that clients would want to give or administer, and we were able to open it up and add more. So it wasn't that it was missing that piece; we were able to just get that, which is great. And it's been that addition has been very good for the overall selection of candidates, as well as again getting a better, more rounded candidate with and having no adverse impact. So you're able to, with all of that, you're hitting a place that hadn't really been hit a lot in the past 50 years, and that is being able to be selective, having a test that screens out enough of the bottom group that's not likely to be successful performers and not have an adverse impact. So it's a win-win in terms of that whole profile. But that's what we do, and we continue to evaluate it. What the biggest challenge with video and simulations is that they look older before they're actually not valid anymore, right? So they start, because at 10 years old, video changes, people's hairstyle changes, people's clothes change. And so you start getting this feeling, even though none of the science shows it, it doesn't, the test performance works, it's all of that. So, it is on our radar in the next few years to go through a development process and partners. Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say is that there has been some discussion, not necessarily in this venue, but in others, about whether or not the Public Safety Civil Service Commission has been responsive enough and had a sense of urgency with regard to this police officer staffing crisis. And I want to say that we were the canaries in the coal mine on this issue, at least from where I sit. We have been flat. We see the applicant numbers, and when we saw them dipping, plunging, we rang that bell as loudly as we could with the mayor's office, the Seattle Police Department. I can't recall if there were other partners involved there with the Seattle Department of Human Resources, with recruiters, and said, we need to address this now. We need to get advertising going. We need to get all of our ducks in a row. But we have been raising this issue for years. So any characterization of us as lacking in urgency, I want to credit all of our elected leaders with having a sense of urgency, but for us, we may have appeared calm simply because we've been dealing with this for years and working with our partners, because folks were responsive in some regard to some of those calls. We've all been trying to do everything we can think of to improve Seattle's ability to recruit, test, and hire a greater number of candidates, qualified candidates. And I have to emphasize qualified, because everyone agrees, all of us agree, that we do not want to lower standards. Seattle has high standards, as it should. Seattle is the largest city in the region, serving the most diverse population. And we've been held accountable in the past for our mistakes. And so we are all committed to doing the very best job we can, hiring the best candidates, and PSCSC plays an important role in that. We recognize the role.
Yeah, the reason I asked about when we start using things, I was thinking, all right, is there some way we can look at say sustained findings of sort of problems from the chief's office, saying what percentage of those officers were hired after this test versus what percentage were hired before the test. And I know that, I guess just based on my work with the city attorney's office dealing with the Brady list, there's so few officers on that, I'm not certain that there's a population big enough to make any sort of meaningful analysis. But yeah, I just wonder, and of course it seems like we haven't been using this test for frankly long enough to develop again a body of officers to make that analysis. So I guess that's probably a dead end. So.
Yeah, I don't know. It might be a dead end. It might or not, might not be a dead end for analysis. I can tell you that folks who were there and the folks who made, and I wasn't there, but the folks who made the decision that we needed to make a change, they would probably tell you that there's a difference in the officers that we hired before and after, or that they've observed some differences. And I mean in no way to diminish officers who've been serving a long time. I thank them for their service and I'm glad they're here. But the exam was in large part, primary part, Seattle's role in it was an effort to do a more robust assessment in those very important areas that Seattle was experiencing problems in. So analysis, I'm not sure if it has been done, can be done, but if you were to speak to people, and we do have one of those on this call today, the Seattle Police Department partnered with the Fire and Police Exams Unit and invested, approximately $1 million in this effort to help develop this exam.
Curious if you're aware, this commission's role is to, and this, what we're talking about now, is to administer this test, this entry-level test. It sounds like perhaps the bigger issue here is how do we get more qualified Seattle police officers out serving the citizens of Seattle? Has there been any studies or any sort of investigation done as to why we're seeing such lower application numbers and what the root causes of those are?
There was a study done in 2019, prior to the pandemic, prior to the protests in 2020, about recruiting police officers and why police officers were leaving. That study exists, and we refer to it in our work. To my knowledge, well, there is a. Now I'm trying to think about the studies. I don't think that there is a study being conducted, so it's possible that there is one.
Okay, anything further on this topic?
Actually, one more point on Commissioner question. We have conducted a survey. Our staff has conducted a survey of folks who have applied to be a Seattle police officer, but not completed the exam process. It's a pretty small subset of folks. And we are almost ready to publish that report. This due diligence kind of took up all the air in the room for a little while, and we're almost ready to publish the report to the mayor's office and other stakeholders.
I'm just curious, we're a stakeholder in this along with countless other stakeholders, and I'm just curious what independent third parties and what other folks who have studied the issue in the last, it sounds like the dip occurred in applications maybe in 2020, 2021, is that?
Yes, we had fairly high applications, but there was enough of a decrease in 2019 that I believe it was the Mayor's Office of Innovation did conduct a study with the Seattle Police Department on how to improve their recruitment and hiring practices. And the big dip happened in 2020, yes.
Yeah, I'd love to know how we can improve our process to help eliminate these root causes of staffing shortages. To really think what we're talking about here. So I'd be curious, at some point, if there's some sort of independent study done, I'd love to see those results.
I would too. Yeah, maybe there's some opportunity for the city to partner with the University of Washington Defense School or something along those lines.
And I know that when Andrea and I were at a city council committee meeting, and there was a presentation by SPD about sort of what their recruitment efforts were and the things they were doing. I mean, they are obviously rigorous, very vigorously sort of working on that aspect of it. Yeah. I
agree. Everybody is putting in their best effort, their best ideas. And we'd all like to make a difference here.
Yeah. Okay, anything further on this topic?
Well, what's the next step?
Yes, so are these recommendations is something you want action by the commission on, or what?
These recommendations I do not think require an action by the commission. However, if you wanted to consider one, it's certainly for you. For now, there's a lot of information in this report, and we just published it on Monday. So I was going to let commissioners sit with it, let me know if they want additional follow-up, and we can consult if there is a urge to take action. we need to continue testing every day. And so we will continue using NTN unless you indicate to me that there's something else you'd like us to consider. But we don't have any action items on the agenda either. Joe always holds us accountable to that. I think maybe for the next meeting, if the commission wants to, take a vote on whether to adopt the findings, adopt the recommendations, or take some other kind of action, we can do that at some point over the summer on the next meeting.
Will you walk us through what you envision in terms of if you receive counter analysis, rebuttal from any other stakeholders, how and when you would pass that along to us for us to consider? Because right now we have this report. What you described is reasonable, but I imagine there may be counter perspectives out there. And if those come to you, I want to think about how we get our hands on that, and then how we discuss that and address that.
Yeah, sure. The way I typically operate is that if I were to receive something like that, or stakeholder were to share information, data analysis, or a request, I would probably come to the chair first and discuss it with that person and sort of decide what steps to take next. It kind of depends on the nature of what I were to receive. And so, but anything that is shared with me, I can commit to anything data analysis or factual information I can commit to share with you all and work with Commissioner Green to sort of figure out the best tool to share that with you, whether that's just to forward an email or to create a summary or something like that. To date, I have not received anything like that. I have received, communication from Deputy Mayor Burgess, from the mayor, which I have shared with you if it has substantive content.
Okay, and I'm happy to defer to you and the chair on process to move forward. I would like eyes on any substantive feedback or input that you get.
Definitely. Will do.
Thank you. So the next item on the agenda is a budget update. It's on page 44 of our materials.
Whew. Thank you, Annie. Right. It's a less fraught topic. Well, budget's pretty fraught actually, but this year's okay.
Yeah, I spoke too soon.
All right, so this is our typical budget report. It shows our spending and our adopted and revised budgets for this year over last year. We are well within our allocated budget. I expect we'll end up either right at or underneath our allocated budget for the year 2024. We have not been instructed to propose any budget reductions for 24. They could come. We don't know. I am in the process, our team is in the process of developing the 2025 budget for the mayor's proposed budget, and then the council will consider that, pass their own budget. We all know budget is a tough road here in the city of Seattle right now. So I'm not entirely sure what changes CIP can expect.
Okay. All right, any department updates?
You have received the main updates for the department. Yeah, this has been taking almost all of our staff's energy over the past month at least, and prior to that as well. I want to give specific thanks to Sarah Butler and Adelaide Elders. They are, my name's on this report, but they are as much authors of this report as I am. And thank you for Dave Wright and the rest of the Fire and Police Stands unit for giving their ideas, their feedback. I really appreciate this. There's nothing that happens that you hear about that is a one-person show. It's really a team effort, and we have, I think, the very best team in the city of Seattle here.
Great, thank you. So the case status report. On
Yeah.
page 45.
Thank you.
47, I
Case status report. We do have a new appeal. The materials are behind the case status report. Officer Hill was separated from the Seattle Police Department and has filed a timely appeal of that discharge. It's currently in abeyance because he also is requesting his union to grieve the matter. And when we hear back from either the union or the appellant, we will know whether or not this appeal will go forward before the commission. The Swartz and Willis appeals were both requested to be voluntarily withdrawn, and I dismissed them. Willis, we understand there was a settlement agreement between the department and the appellant. And Swartz, I believe, Trace, is it correct that his union is grieving that matter? Oh, he just withdrew. Okay. And the Collins dismissal order was also issued on April 26th, which I probably wrote at the last meeting. The following pages, we continue to receive many requests for reinstatement to the eligible register, requests for probationary extension. We vet those. We're in good partnership with both the Seattle Police and Fire Departments to ensure that those are being handled properly and probationers are notified when the request is made. And I also want to just state for the record in this meeting that the extension, so we did an update to PSCSC Rule 10.03 last year. You all did that work. Thank you very much. I know a lot went into that as well. To extend the time window for the look back period for requests to return to the eligible register, that window will expire on June 30th, 2024. And requests that are made prior to that date will be considered. People will not be booted out of that process if they've already entered the process. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is the fire proof exam unit update. Oh, yes. Ms. Sade.
There. Hello, I'm actually Rachel and Yoshiko today. Yoshiko is sitting in a sitting with the development committee meeting this morning. So which would you like to hear first, police or fire?
How about the police department?
Okay, so as has been mentioned by Director Shealy, our applications for entry-level police officer are looking up. I personally believe that the resumption of advertising earlier this year, we didn't have advertising going on for a couple of years actually, but advertising started happening earlier this year. The contract, as you know, the police contract was settled, and I think that those have had impacts, very direct impacts on the number of our applicants. In the current exam cycle that ends on the 28th for applications and July 2nd for testing, we have 580 applicants as of this morning. You know, as you know, there's always those who apply and, you know, those who actually sit for the test and then pass. But the last I looked, I wasn't able to count how many on the exam website this morning have passed. But the last time I checked it, we had already over 80 individuals who had sat for the test and passed for it. So that tells me that we are looking at the largest list that we've had in quite some time. So I'm very excited about that. I've shared that information with SPD, and the background unit is getting ready to receive a lot of new names for pre-employment screening. With regard to what else is going on the police side, we had the police sergeant's exam this year, as you know, and that list is due to be posted on July 12th. And so we'll be posting a new register. It is on the smaller side. It's the smallest one during my tenure. But, you know, that is, you know, due to our staffing issues right now, and we'll pick it up for next time. After the list is posted, we will have an opportunity for candidates to be able to come in and to review. Those are exams that are video recorded, and then they're scored by assessors after that video recording takes place. We will have our applicants, our candidates who participated in the testing process, get the opportunity. We will schedule a time frame that will happen in either late July, early August, or both, for individuals to come in and review their own videotape performance alongside the exam scoring criteria. And we do this as a opportunity for candidates to have that learning experience. We are also during that time period, July, August, we're starting our work with putting together development teams for police captain and police lieutenant in 2025. And as you know, it takes a series of months and meetings to develop and administer those exams. And we'll start our work on those exams in this summer. On the fires, were there any questions about police exams before I move on to fire? Yes, Andrea.
I asked Adelaide to provide a little information about the sort of improvement over time of police applications.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and do that now? We can, before we move on to fire. Okay. Thank you, Adelaide.
Hi, everyone. This is Adelaide. I can speak a little bit to our applications. And like Rachel said, things are looking pretty encouraging. Let me go ahead and share my screen so y'all have some visuals. Okay. One sec. Okay, are you all able to see a screen now?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so I'm going to pull this graph up here. So one of the metrics that we use to look at applications is the number of applications that we receive per day. And that we look at that as a more standardized number, since each exam cycle is a different length. It helps us make more of an apples to apples comparison of, what we've been seeing in the past to what we're seeing right now. So we are currently hanging out at about 14 to 15 applications per day. And to give this some context as to why that is significant is that about a year ago, we were averaging more like towards 5.5 per day. And the same time in 2022, we were at about 6 applications per day. So we're, seeing about 3 times as many applications as we had 1 year ago. We are also on track to really significantly surpass the annual applications that we've had over the past few years. So in 2022 and in 2023, we had about a total of 1,900 applications each year. And so far this year in 2024, we are already at 1,600 applications, and it's just June. So, definitely looking encouraging on the application front. And I think if this trend continues, we'll be looking at a significant bounce back to the volume of applications that we were having, pre-pandemic. And, of course, bearing in mind that the hiring process takes several months, there's going to be some time before that upward trend kind of translates into increased hires. But from what we're seeing right now, we're definitely, feeling encouraged.
Thank you, Adelaide.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adelaide. There's certainly a lot for us to be excited about. We've been very happy to see these numbers pouring in. Next is the fire exams report. And we've had a series of promotional exam processes which have occurred recently. During the week of May 20th, we administered the fire captain exam, the assessment portion of that exam, and we had 25 candidates participate in that process. During the week of June 10th, we had the administration of the fire battalion chief exam, and we had 9 candidates participate in that portion of the exam. Yoshiko is currently working, and in fact, has been this week sitting with the development committee for Fireboat Pilot, the written exam for Fireboat Pilot will be administered on July 8th. That's part one. And those who pass that portion of the test will be scheduled for the practical portion of the test in September, early September. And additionally, Yoshiko is working on preparations, all of the logistics that are required to put on the 2025, actually 24-25 firefighter exam. The written exam portion will occur late this fall, and then the interviews for the firefighter will be in early 2025. And that's a big undertaking. As you know, it's 3.5 weeks of interviews that occur for all of those candidates who pass the initial written exam. Wanted to give a shout out, actually, if I might, so that the commissioners know what a great commission staff they have. We've had a very long spring, if you will. We've had a series of promotional exam processes, lots of moving parts that go with those. And I just want to give a shout out, and I know Yoshiko would agree with me, to Andrea and Sarah Butler and Teresa Jacobs. They've each in their own way contributed immensely to the success of these exams. Andrea came and met with all of our assessor panels when they came to town to conduct the scoring. Sarah Butler happened to help us out with candidates who wanted to come in and take a look at the candidate or the scoring criteria for each of those exams. And Teresa helped us out by staffing the exam prep room, where candidates spend an hour, typically hour to hour and a half, depending on the rank, preparing for their interviews. And everything went off without a hitch, and it's in large part due to the support we received from these folks. So just wanted to pass that along.
Thank you. So the next item is the staffing figures.
Yes. I do have numbers from the Seattle Police Department. I do not have numbers from the Seattle Fire Department today, and I don't see Hannah on the call. So it might just be for the City of Seattle Police Department. And let me just close the email. SPD has, this is straight from the horse's mouth. Heidi Wood at SPD. SPD has 1,074 authorized positions in the rank of rank of officer and chief. As of the end of May, 963 of those were filled. They also have 33 authorized positions for recruits, 15 of those are filled, and 44 authorized positions for student officers, and 59 are filled somehow. So that is the data directly from SPD, and I don't mean to laugh because I'm sure this is correct, and thank you, Ms. Wood, so much for providing it. She's a wonderful person to work with. And I don't have numbers for Seattle Fire Department, but when I get them, I can follow up by email. I wanted to share, Rachel's sentiment and just give some shout out to our team. I received written feedback and verbal feedback from assessors who come from around the United States, Western United States primarily, to participate in our assessment processes for ranks above entry level. The feedback is incredible. I was just looking for it here. Particularly, I'm going to forward you a letter from, I'm going to get his name wrong, but he is a chief from Colorado Springs Fire Chief named Grant Tinker. He has come back repeatedly because he feels that our process is the best. He learns from our process, and we just support our assessors in the very best way that we can, which is a really important part, and light doesn't get shown that we couldn't do this without assessors from other agencies. And so I am grateful to them. We send our ranking officers to other jurisdictions to work on assessment panels for them. It's really a mutual aid effort. And I just wanted to call that out. The assessors who visit here for Seattle to help us out, and the team that puts these promotional exams and administrative entry level exams also. It really is a high level of work that they're doing.
Question regarding the police staffing information. The number I've had in my head is somewhere around 1,400 officers, and the number we've had the last 2 months is 1,000. What was the number? 1,000 change.
1,074, excluding recruits and student officers, which amounts to about, it looks like 80 approximately. So that's like 1,150 total. I believe, and maybe we'll ask someone from SPD to come next time and explain this to us, but I believe they have unfunded positions as well, and that may make up the difference. So the city councilors, city council members maybe limited their budget or it's to look provide. So I am guessing a little bit here, but those numbers seem low as well. But I think the word authorized is the key there.
Authorized budget pocket for something. I guess the thing I'm curious about is we all are aware of the staffing shortages, but by this number,
We're only down 100.
we're only down
Yeah.
100, but my understanding is it's a bigger deficit than that. And so I'm just curious to learn what do these numbers mean and how short are we really?
I would be very happy to ask someone from Seattle Police Department HR department to come and explain that to you at the next meeting. Yeah, because I heard Seattle Police Department also state in a public safety meeting a few weeks ago that their hiring goal is 125 officers. So yeah, and it's kind of a hard, I'm sure it's a big puzzle, complicated, difficult to put together. I don't pretend to understand Seattle Police Department's deployment strategies. It's certainly not in my knowledge or expertise to do so. So I'll ask someone from Seattle Police Department to come to you about that.
I'm also curious, do we receive any sort of forecasting data as far as how many retirements are coming up, how many folks are leaving the department, what our needs are going to be here in the next 1, 2, 3, 10 years?
I wish that we did have a little bit more information about that. No, we don't generally receive any kind of forecast. And folks, you know, keep their retirements pretty close to their chest until it is time to put in their notice or start dealing with that. But
I'm sure they have some data that says folks between age 50 and 65.
How long they
hero
been,
their
like, how long they've been in the force. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that would be great to get more information because yeah, those numbers just Rachel has. Oh, does she? She did. Rachel, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say the last I saw, they do put out a report of, you know, those individuals who are eligible for retirement, and that the last I saw was 280, and I forget during what time frame, but they do put out that information. But again, it's very difficult to know, obviously, who amongst that number, you know, of that group of individuals are actually going to retire. We just know how many are eligible for that. But we can get you that data.
So thank you. Yeah, I'm curious to know what the department uses for their forecasting as far as their staffing levels.
Yeah. All right. Next item is action items. There don't appear to be any action items. Old and new business. Doesn't appear to be anything there. I will point out our next meeting is scheduled for July 18th. I'm not going to be here, so.
One question on that, Teresa, I noticed on the website, it says the meeting's on July 25th. The commission did pass, or that you were scheduled for the year, I'm not sure which date is correct.
we have 2 meetings on this.
There's 2 meetings in July.
Oh, is it?
There's one on the 18th, and then there's one on the 25th, because there was a fire
Okay, so they're 1 week.
potential, appeal reviews.
Okay.
Yeah, let's look. The 18th is,
On the website, the 18th isn't on there.
oh, it's not. Right, we'll get that up there. That one. Something wrong there. Possible fire battalion chief exam protest reviews. None were filed. No protests were filed for battalion chief. And then the next one is for fireboat pilot, an exam which has not been administrated yet, so we do not have any sense of whether exam protest exam protest or exam protest reviews will be requested. So I think we'll need, and the date on that was relative to the date of administration. We need to give folks enough time to do their protest period and the following. And so we may be able to cancel the 18th meeting and keep the 25th. I know you can't attend either.
No, I can be the 25th, not the 18th.
Oh, I think.
Yeah, I'm coming back the 23rd. So. All right.
Maybe we should just conduct one meeting and do it on the 25th. Does the commissioner can all do that? We must have already checked.
I have to look at my calendar.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that, but I bet we should have your calendar. We typically do, but we make mistakes too, as we know. And I apologize. I do apologize to everyone on the meeting and in person for the kerfuffle about the online web address. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
And just so I think to be clear for the record, the initial part was recorded, this part's recorded, so when the staff puts this together, there'll be a recording. So the whole meeting will be available via the recording. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
We'll either do it through one or two recordings, depending on what capabilities we have.
All right. Well, again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you. Oh, yes. Sarah Lee.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, Andrea, I sent you some information from SPD about the hiring or retention that they made to, I think it was a public safety committee or the council.
My computer has died. Director Lee, you sent me the numbers, the data.
Yes.
From SPD. Okay, would you mind telling us what that is before we conclude the meeting? I don't have access to it right now.
Oh, sorry. It's a presentation, I think, that was made to council, which talked about the staffing, and it looks like it was done. It was Q1 of 2024. And I'm trying to figure out what it was, but it has all of the sworn number pocketed positions. So like average FTE was 1,074, new estimates 153, and it goes into there's a lot of information about the data and the numbers. So I just thought that might be helpful for you guys.
I appreciate that, Director Lee. I'm really glad to hear that you're passing that information along, and I will pass it along to the commissioners as well.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding that. If you don't mind, you said that you will pass it on to the commissioners. Is that something that's going to be available in another public meeting, or are you going to require us to do a PDR?
The SMD presentation that Ms. Lee just discussed?
Yeah, numbers, correct numbers. She was just throwing out random numbers, it sounded like.
Oh, well, I think probably the easiest way is to submit a public disclosure request for that document. We'll be sure to get it to you. Okay.
Yeah, it was supposed to be in the agenda.
I know, but I don't have access to it right now. If Ms. Lee wants to share that
Are you
information,
going to share it in another public meeting?
I will share it. I can talk about it next month at the meeting.
All right. Nothing else. I would move that we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you all again very much for being here.